welcome to the third module, Body Cavity and Membranes, from Chapter 2 of Unit 1. This course has been divided into several modules that will help you better understand the cavities present in our bodies and the various membranes which engulf our organs. This course has been designed to be a review course to help prepare you to take the CRC, the Certified Risk Coder Certification Exam from the AAPC. Hello everyone, welcome back. Today's class is about the different cavities and membranes present in our body. As a coder, knowledge of the human anatomy will make you recognize the contents of the progress note so that you can translate the progress note verbiage to the code data efficiently. In this module, we will differentiate among the various cavities in the human body, identify where they are located, define the various body membranes, and discuss their functions. Previously, we discussed the various organs of the human body and their functions. The body maintains its internal functioning by the means of sheaths, membranes, or other structures that separate the compartments. The areas in our body which contain our internal organs are called body cavities. It is lined with a layer of cells and filled with fluids to protect the organs.
Sir, I have a question. When do these cavities form in the body, along with the organs?
These cavities are formed when the body is still in its embryonic stage. Solid masses of tissues fold inward on themselves and create a cavity or a pocket, which then holds the organs. Think of them as the incubator in which the organs develop. These cavities differ by organism to organism. We humans have two main body cavities, the dorsal cavity and the ventral cavity. The dorsal cavity is located along the posterior of the human body and protects the fragile internal organs, while the ventral cavity is located along the anterior part of the body and allows the organs to change their shape and size as they perform their functions. For example, the contraction and expansion of the lungs. Now both of these cavities can be further subdivided. If only our body was that simple. The dorsal cavity is subdivided into the cranial cavity and the vertebral cavity, while the ventral cavity can be subdivided into the thoracic cavity, abdominal cavity, and the pelvic cavity. Let's discuss each of these cavities in detail. Let's start with the top of the body. The cranial cavity is present in the cranium of the skull. It contains our brain, the meninges, cerebrospinal fluid, portions of the cranial nerves, and blood vessels. The roof of the cranial cavity is covered by the skull cap, and the floor is covered by the upper surface of the base of the skull. The cranial cavity is one of the major reasons why our head doesn't crack open as soon as it hits the ground. The cerebrospinal fluid cushions these blows. We will discuss the cerebrospinal fluid later in this module. Coming down from the head, we venture into the spinal region. The second body cavity is the spinal cavity, which is a hollow chamber inside the spinal column housing the spinal cord. It continues down from the cranial cavity. This cavity is enclosed within the vertebral foramen of the vertebrate, and is hence also referred to as the vertebral cavity.
Sir, what is a vertebral foramen?
It is an opening formed by the anterior segment and the posterior part. It lies in between the vertebral arch and the body. The next cavity is the thoracic cavity. It is the second largest body cavity and contains the lungs, tracheobronchial tree, heart, and all major veins and arteries attached to it, the thymus, a tiny organ which produces T cells to fight infection, and the esophagus, which channels the food from the throat to the stomach. After the thoracic cavity, there is the abdominal cavity. It is the largest cavity of the body and is present within the abdomen, the space between the abdominal wall and the spine. It contains the lowermost portion of the esophagus, the stomach, the liver, other organs such as gallbladder, spleen, and the intestine, but it excludes the sigmoid colon and rectum. The cavity is lined by a protective layer known as the peritoneum, which plays an important role in the immunity of the body, supporting of organs, and storing fat. Lastly in our list of body cavities is the pelvic cavity. It is the lowermost part of the body, in the space comprising of urinary bladder, certain reproductive organs, rectum, and some parts of the large intestine. It is roofed by superior opening of the pelvis, known as the pelvic inlet, and floored by the pelvic floor. Other major arteries, veins, muscles, and nerves are also contained in it. The whole structure within the pelvic cavity is extremely complex and meshed. Thus, if one of the organs gets disordered, it may consequently impact the other organs too. With that, the first part of the module is over. Let's quickly play a game to see how well you have understood the cavities. In this part of the module, we shall discuss membranes. They are thin sheets of tissues that cover the body, line body cavities, and cover organs within these hollow cavities. We can divide these membranes into two broad categories: the epithelial membrane and the connective tissue membrane.
Sir, can you please elaborate more on the epithelial membrane? I seem to have forgotten about it.
Yes, they are the tissues which cover all the exposed surfaces of our body, from the external part of the skin to the inner lining of the mouth, the digestive tract, etc. The epithelial membrane consists of epithelial tissue and the connective tissue, while the connective tissue membrane solely consists of connective tissues. We will discuss the 5 membranes: the mucous membrane, serous membrane, cutaneous membrane, synovial membrane, and the meninges. Of these, the mucous membrane, serous membrane, and the cutaneous membrane are part of the epithelial membrane, while the synovial membrane and meninges are part of the connective tissue membrane. Let's start off with the mucous membrane. As stated earlier, mucous membrane, or mucosa, is a type of epithelial membrane. They line the body cavities, which are open to the outside. Our entire digestive tract is lined within the mucous membranes, along with other tracts such as respiratory, excretory, and reproductive tracts. This membrane also strengthens the fragile epithelial layer and produces mucus. The second membrane of the epithelial membrane is the serous membrane. It is also called serosa, just as the mucous membrane is called a mucosa. It covers the body cavities, which do not open directly to the outside, and covers many organs inside it. These membranes are covered by a thin layer of fluid, known as serous, which is secreted by the epithelium.
What is the function of this fluid?
It does what majority of fluids are supposed to do. It lubricates the membrane and reduces friction when the organs move against each other. The last type of epithelial membrane is cutaneous membrane. Broadly speaking, it is just a fancy term for skin. The term cutaneous literally means of the skin. It belongs to the stratified squamous epithelium, resting on top of the connecting tissue.
What is the stratified squamous epithelium?
Squamous means flattened, and when the flattened epithelial cells are arrayed in layers upon the basal membrane, it is known as stratified squamous epithelium. The outer surface of this membrane is covered with dead, keratinized cells that help protect the body from the likes of pathogens, etc. Now let's move on to the connective tissue membranes. Just to recap, these membranes contain only the connective tissue. The first one of these connective tissues is the synovial membrane. It lines the cavity of a freely movable joint, such as a knee, shoulder, or elbow. The inner layer of the synovial membrane secretes fibroblasts, which are a type of cell which releases an acid called hyaluronin. This acid amalgamates with water to form the synovial fluid, which in turn acts as a natural lubricant, enabling the joints to move freely without any friction. Lastly, we have the meninges. The meninges consist of 3 layers of protective tissues: the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. These are found within the dorsal cavity and serve as a protective covering for the brain and the spinal cord. Dura mater in Latin means hard mother due to its tough and flexible nature, and is the most superior of the meningeal layers. This dura mater prevents our brain from getting displaced by forming several structures that separate the cranial cavity into compartments, hence keeping the brain in the right position. The middle layer of the meninges, the arachnoid mater, acts as a medium for the cerebrospinal fluid. And lastly, the innermost part of the meninges is the pia mater, which adheres closely to the brain and helps in the formation of the cerebrospinal fluid. Together, pia mater, along with the cranial cavity, act as a cushion, dulling the force of impact by distributing it. We have reached the end of our 3rd module of our 2nd chapter. I have given you a basic overview of the various cavities and membranes present in the body and their location, ensuring that you are ready whenever a question regarding the body cavity pops up in your CRC exam.